Welcome to this second part of our portrait painting tutorial. We will start off by working off ground, basically covering all the background. Now I did draw out a grid and sketched out the face, but because my ground was too thick, I lost a lot of the information. So you might want to get a bit lighter on the ground or darker on your lines. Though I was able to pinpoint some of the information, like the eyes, from there I was able to work out the rest of the face. I'm drawing outlines that can help me get the proportions correct. And I'm always looking at my reference picture, looking for information that can help me, such as the distance of the nose to the eyes and the distance of the eyes to the ears. I'm using every part in reference to each other to get as much information as accurately as I can. Only then do I start the blocking stage, and here it's up to you whether you want to work on your highlights first or your shadows. Working with acrylics makes this stage run by faster and easier. Remember our fat overlay rule. Acrylics dry much faster than oils. This allows us to go through the different painting stages much quicker. You can take advantage of the properties of both mediums. Just never ever mix acrylics on top of oils. Right, that's gonna create some problems in the long run. Now it is also a good time before you start laying any major paint to make any changes to your composition. Step back and look at it. Does everything look fine? Does it look proportional? And if it doesn't, then go back and fix it. It's much easier to do it now in the early stages of the painting when you are not that attached to it than later when you have done much work and you're not going to be willing to make any major changes. For example, here I went back with a pencil again to redraw some of the details to make sure I was okay with the composition. It is also important to mention our warm and cool tones. Remember, our cool tones are usually our blues, greens, and violets, and our warm colors or our warm tones are reds, yellows, and oranges. And you could say our whites as well. Now, our browns are a special case, and sometimes depending on the color, the colors that surround it, it can either be warm or cool. We can state this for the other colors as well. For example, a violet mixed with red becomes much warmer, and vice versa. Mixed with a bit of blue, it becomes much cooler. That is depending on the colors also that surround it. Most of our composition is under shadow, and so all the colors are a bit toned down or desaturated. Taking this into account, we want to mix our skin tones with some of those cool tones. And we don't need to add much to the mix. Just by adding a pinch will be enough for the most part. But work those colors, add color as you see fit. Sometimes I find myself mixing a bit too much and I completely change the color. Nothing that can be saved, but take my advice and save yourself some trouble. So just do a little at a time. You can call this stage sort of a blocking stage as well, as I'm covering major areas with a similar tone I want to cover the blue background. I'm also mixing this paint with a bit of mineral spirits. This helps the paint run much easier and also helps in the drying process. Since all these initial layers will be at the bottom, I want them to dry much faster. And here's a quick tip: you can squeeze some of the paint from your brush and use it. So it's also a good way to keep your brushes free of paint. Just squeeze it with your fingers. That's all up to you. Shoulder, for the most part, is a purple tone, and that's the color that I mix. A bit of purple, some burnt umber, some white, and work the color onto the surface. Constantly mixing them with more paint and different colors. I don't want to be precise with the mixing. I'm only creating an illusion by varying them, adding some whites, adding some oranges. This makes your painting much more interesting. Matching them perfectly is almost impossible. You can only get an impression. So don't be scared to make mistakes. As I said before, those mistakes are the things that sometimes make your painting a great painting. Let paint be paint. I continue working mostly with large brushes, and little by little I start working my way into the molding stage where my brushes get smaller and I start laying down only small hints of color here and there. And though you can follow these steps as written in the books, I myself don't do this all the time. Sometimes I find myself working only on the face and forget about the rest of the details such as the hair and the clothing. That's a bad habit, but not the worst one. Pretty much the same way I went about working on the face, I do the hair and the crown and the clothing, except maybe I use different techniques to create the illusion of hair. Here you can see that I'm constantly also measuring, getting my proportions, even at this stage. And also you can see the way I'm using my palette knife to push the paint around on the hair. I'm constantly stepping away from the painting and looking at it as a whole to see if I lack the colors I've mixed or if I need to add more somewhere. I check for any mistakes that I might have done or something that I didn't notice at the beginning stages. And as you can see, I'm just really working all those tiny details, adding the slightest of paint, the slightest of color changes in the eyes and in the rest of the face. Here on the nose also, those little highlights. And I lay my paint and look at it, see how it looks, see if it's enough, till I'm satisfied. Most of my paint is still somewhat malleable, and I'm able to work corrections as I go. Don't wait for the paint to dry. This is the advantage of oil paint. It extends drying time. Its extended drying time allows us to go back and fix anything that might be a bit off. As you can see, I make the tiniest of adjustments and step by step, working my way up to the lightest lights and the darkest darks. Again, constantly mixing in different colors, never attempting to mix the same color, just something similar to the layer underneath. I'm actually not even using black at all. My black is my ultramarine with a bit of violet or even green. Going back to what I've said before, I vary my colors. It's much more interesting alternating them than going for the obvious one. Your eyes make sense of it all. Now for the crown. I went about the same way Velázquez made his paintings, or at least how I think he made them. I'm not worried about the perfect shape or the perfect angle, just an impression of what the crown is. And to finish up this painting, I added all the little highlights and reflections, especially on the hair and the eyes, of course. And I can continue working on this painting forever, but I must let it go and declare it finished. This has also been a learning experience for me. So remember that every painting session is a learning experience, and there will always be something to be learned. Take what you have learned and apply it to your next painting, and so on and so forth. The endless journey of a painter in paper. Seeking to achieve perfection can be a good thing, as it is a good way to drive yourself to do better, but it can also be destructive at times. Being too self-critical will not take you anywhere. Love your work, love your mistakes, and love the journey, as everything you do makes you. And I'll end this session with a quote from Bob Ross: "We don't make mistakes, just happy little accidents."
And we have reached the end of this painting tutorial, so I hope you guys enjoyed watching it, and I also hope that you guys learned something from it. I think the takeaway is that you don't need to be afraid of making mistakes. That's what's gonna make your art stand out from the rest, right? So embrace the mistakes, use them to your advantage, and enjoy the painting process. And I also want to remind you guys that El Paso Museum of Art will be bringing out more tutorials, so please stay tuned, and thank you for watching.